The moment Soraya turned the dorm room lock behind me, my heart stopped, not because I was afraid of her, but because I saw tears sliding down her face before she even spoke. Outside, the campus was bright with afternoon sunlight, parents were laughing, students were dragging suitcases across the courtyard, and somewhere a marching band was practicing like it was the happiest day of the year. But inside that small room on the third floor, with boxes stacked against the wall and a mattress still wrapped in plastic, a 19-year-old girl looked at me like the whole world had finally become too heavy to carry. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the kind of love that can save someone before they fall apart, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries. Sometimes one small act of compassion can become the turning point in a person's entire life. My name is Idris Vale, and before that day, I thought I was only helping a neighbor's daughter move into college. Soraya lived 3 houses down from me with her grandmother, Mrs. Navila, a quiet woman who always swept her porch before sunrise and watered her plants as if they were children. I had known Soraya since she was a skinny little girl with oversized glasses and a backpack bigger than her body, always walking home alone while other kids ran in groups. I was not family, not really, but after my wife passed away and my son moved overseas, the neighborhood became my only connection to the world, and helping people became the only thing that made my empty house feel less like a punishment. That morning, Soraya called me just after 9. Her voice sounded cheerful at first, but too careful, like someone trying not to cry while smiling. She said her grandmother's knees were hurting badly and the taxi driver had cancelled, and she asked if I could help move her things into her college dorm before orientation started. I had planned to fix the broken gate behind my house, but something in her voice made me put down the toolbox. By 10, my old blue pickup was loaded with 2 suitcases, 3 cardboard boxes, a desk lamp, a cheap fan, a bag of books, and 1 small framed photo wrapped carefully in a towel. Soraya sat beside me in the passenger seat, wearing a faded green sweater despite the warm day, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The campus was alive when we arrived. Families hugged under trees, fathers carried mini fridges, mothers adjusted bedsheets, and new students stood around pretending they were not scared. Soraya watched all of it through the windshield, and for a second I saw her face change. She looked both amazed and wounded, like she had reached a dream but did not know if she was allowed to enter it. I tried to make light conversation, telling her the dorm building looked sturdier than my first apartment and that at least the elevator worked, but she only nodded. Every time her phone buzzed, she flinched and turned the screen down before I could see who it was. We carried everything upstairs in the heat of the afternoon. The dorm hallway smelled like fresh paint, cardboard, perfume, and nervous beginnings. Soraya's room was small but bright, with 1 wide window facing the courtyard and sunlight falling across the bare floor. Her roommate had not arrived yet, so the room felt strangely suspended, like a stage waiting for a life to begin. I set the last box near the desk and wiped sweat from my forehead, joking that college should give honorary degrees to anyone who survived move-in day. Soraya smiled faintly, but it disappeared almost instantly. Then she closed the door. The click of the lock sounded louder than it should have. When I turned around, she was standing with her back against the door, both hands shaking. Her eyes were red now, and the brave mask she had worn all morning finally broke. She whispered that she had lied. Her grandmother's knees were hurting, yes, but that was not why she had called me. She said she needed help because she was afraid that if she came to college alone, she would turn around and go back home. Then she opened one of the boxes and pulled out a stack of envelopes tied with a ribbon. They were scholarship letters, bills, warning notices, and 1 final form from the college financial office. Her tuition was not fully covered. Her meal plan had not been paid. Her housing deposit was still short. And the deadline was that afternoon. For a moment, I could not speak. Soraya stood in the sunlight, ashamed of needing help, ashamed of dreaming too big, ashamed of being poor in a hallway full of families who seemed to have everything. She told me her grandmother had sold jewelry, taken sewing work late into the night, and skipped medicines twice to save money. Soraya had worked at a bakery all summer, cleaning trays and closing the shop after midnight. Still, they were short. She had not told anyone because people in the neighborhood already looked at them with pity, and pity, she said, felt like being slowly buried while still alive. I sat on the edge of the plastic-covered mattress and listened. She told me her mother had left when she was 6. Her father had promised to come for her one day, but promises had become birthday cards, then missed calls, then nothing. School had been her escape. Books had been the one place where nobody asked why her shoes were old or why her grandmother came to parent meetings instead of her parents. She had earned admission to this college with grades, essays, and stubborn hope, but now that she was standing inside the room she had dreamed of for years, one unpaid balance was about to send her home. I looked around the dorm room at the boxes she had packed so carefully. There was no vanity mirror, no expensive speaker, no decorations except a hand-stitched pillow and the wrapped photo. When I unwrapped it, I saw a younger Soraya standing beside Mrs. Navila in front of their small house, both of them smiling like survival itself was a victory. My chest tightened. I thought of my late wife, Meher, who had once told me that the worst thing in the world was not losing your way, but reaching a door and finding nobody willing to open it. So I asked Soraya how much was needed. She lowered her eyes and said the number like it was a crime. It was not a small amount for me. I was retired, living carefully, counting expenses, pretending loneliness did not cost anything. But I also knew there are moments in life when money is no longer just money. Sometimes it becomes a bridge. Sometimes it becomes a hand grabbing another hand before the fall. I told Soraya to gather the papers, and we walked across campus to the financial office. The woman behind the counter looked tired from answering the same questions all day. Soraya could barely speak, so I explained that we were there to settle the balance. Soraya grabbed my sleeve and shook her head, tears shining in her eyes, but I signed where they told me to sign and paid what needed to be paid. It was done in less than 10 minutes. Years of fear, months of labor, nights of silent crying all reduced to a receipt printed on thin white paper. Soraya stared at that receipt like it was impossible. Then she covered her face and cried so hard that people in the waiting area turned to look. I did not hug her right away. I simply stood beside her, giving her the dignity of not turning her pain into a scene. When she finally looked up, she said she would pay me back, every cent, even if it took years. I told her she could pay me back by staying, studying, and becoming someone who would one day open a door for another frightened person. The rest of the afternoon changed completely. We returned to the dorm room, and this time the sunlight felt warmer. Soraya unpacked her books first, placing them on the desk like sacred objects. Then she taped a small calendar to the wall, arranged her grandmother's photo near the lamp, and folded her clothes into the drawers with careful pride. Her roommate arrived, a cheerful girl named Maribel with pink sneakers and a mother who spoke loudly enough for the whole hallway to hear. Soraya grew shy again, but Maribel smiled at her, offered half a sandwich, and suddenly the room no longer felt like a place of fear. Before I left, Soraya walked me down to the courtyard. Students were still moving in, but the day had softened into late afternoon. She thanked me again, but the words were too small for what had happened. I told her that sometimes family is not only the people who raise you or share your blood. Sometimes family is the person who shows up when the road becomes too steep. She nodded, wiping her cheeks, and for the first time that day, her smile looked real. Weeks passed. Then months. Soraya sent updates every Sunday evening. She told me about her first exam, her first failed quiz, her first campus job at the library, her first winter away from home. She struggled, but she stayed. There were nights she wanted to quit. There were days when wealthy classmates made careless comments that cut deeper than they knew. There were mornings when she missed her grandmother so badly that she cried in the bathroom before class. But she kept going. One afternoon, almost a year later, I found an envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small money order for $20. The letter said it was the first payment of many. I laughed and cried at the same time. I pinned the letter to my refrigerator, right beside an old photograph of Meher. Every month after that, another tiny payment came, sometimes $10, sometimes $15, always with a note about what Soraya had learned. I never cashed them. I kept them in a wooden box, because they were not repayments to me. They were proof that hope had survived. 3 years later, Mrs. Navila passed away quietly in her sleep. Soraya called me from campus, unable to breathe through her grief. I drove there in the rain and found her sitting on the dorm steps, now a senior, still wearing that old green sweater. She looked smaller than she had in years. At the funeral, she stood alone beside the grave until I stepped beside her. She took my arm, and we stood there together as the wind moved through the cemetery grass. Afterward, she told me her grandmother had died peacefully because she knew Soraya was going to graduate. That thought became the thread Soraya held on to. On graduation day, the campus was bright again, just like move-in day. The same courtyard was filled with families, flowers, cameras, and proud noise. I wore my best suit, the one I had not worn since my son's wedding. Soraya crossed the stage with honors, her name called loud and clear. For a second, I saw the girl from the locked dorm room, trembling beside a stack of unpaid bills. Then I saw the woman she had become, standing tall, eyes shining, carrying not just a degree but every sacrifice that had brought her there. After the ceremony, Soraya found me in the crowd. She placed something in my hand. It was the same wooden box I had kept her money orders in, but now it held a letter from the university. She had been accepted into a graduate program in social work, with full funding. She said she wanted to work with students who were one emergency away from giving up. She wanted to build a fund someday for young people like her. She wanted to name it after her grandmother and Meher, 2 women who had believed in quiet strength. That was when I finally understood why she had locked that dorm room door years before. It was not to trap me in a secret. It was because she had spent her whole life being strong in public, and for once, she needed a safe place to fall apart. She did not need a hero. She needed one person to stay long enough to hear the truth. Years have passed since then. Soraya now works at a student support center, and every semester she calls me to tell me about someone she helped. A boy who nearly dropped out because his mother got sick. A girl who slept in the library because she had nowhere safe to go. A quiet freshman who reminded her of herself. She cannot save everyone, but she tries. And every time she does, I feel like that afternoon sunlight in the dorm room never really faded. It simply moved from one life to another. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach people who may be losing hope and need to believe that kindness still exists. And before the ending, I have one special request. Comment kindness opens doors if you believe one caring person can change the direction of someone else's life. I used to think my life had become small after losing my wife, my family distance growing wider, and my days repeating like quiet echoes. But Soraya taught me that no life is finished while it can still become shelter for someone else. That day, she called me to help her move into a college dorm. Then she locked the door and said the words that changed both our lives. She said she was scared, she was tired, and she did not know how to keep going. I could have walked away. I could have told myself it was not my problem. Instead, I stayed. And sometimes, staying is the miracle someone has been praying for.